and welcome everyone to the Capital Mind podcast. If you'd like to know more about us, visit capitalmind.in, and if you'd like to invest with us, do visit capitalmindwealth.com.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as the basis for investment decisions. Clients of Capital Mind may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Hi, this is Deepak Shenoy. Welcome again. This is the Capital Mind podcast. Number 13, we're going to talk this time about housing. Aditya has a very interesting set of questions. So welcome Aditya first to the show and welcome to all of you.
Hi Deepak, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure being here. So today we're going to talk about should you buy a house? I want to start with the types of buyers. So the first type of buyer that I want to discuss is the emotional buyer. Like generally we have seen that in Asian cultures, buying a house is considered to be a bedrock of stability. Generally, society considers it that way. We know that this happens in India for sure, but I was surprised when I came across a survey done in China, which found out that when it comes to marriage, 75% of the Chinese women consider a man's ability to provide a home as very important. The Chinese actually call this the mother-in-law economics, where the prospective mother-in-law actually prefers men having their own house. It's funny, but it's true. Also, in traditional societies, parents generally consider owning a home as a good loan rather than buying an expensive car, which is considered as a wasteful expenditure. They believe that property prices generally appreciate over the long term, and monthly EMIs enforce some sort of financial discipline, especially the middle class parents. That young couples will blow up their money in discretionary spending, so better lock them up in a property loan. These kind of buyers look at property as an emotional investment. But even for these people, this decision will have financial implications, isn't it? Like paying 30-40% of your salary as monthly EMI towards an illiquid asset, which locks you in, and you also have to sacrifice other goals. So what do you think of real estate as an emotional investment?
From a point of view of where Indians are, I think we're like the Chinese. We think real estate is the next best thing in the world and perhaps next only to gold. Though we will actually consider real estate ahead of gold. We buy real estate first and then consider buying gold.
Yes.
But here's where I think, as an emotional decision, it's paramount. I'm saying that because people like to own their own houses. People like to have a house they can call their own. We've gone to an Uber economy where people say, okay, I don't care if the car I own is something I own. So why don't I rather rent that car? That part is also going to flow into houses, right? So to a certain extent, you can do a set of things in a house that's rented just as well as you can do in a house that you own. But the ownership is a nice, fuzzy, warm feeling that you have. And for that, if you're willing to pay, you should pay. Now, I'll stop there because most people now at this point start saying, oh, but it will also appreciate. I'm like, no. Forget about this. It will also appreciate. You live in the house, it's not an investment. It is just... Because what will happen is once you live in a house, you will never get out of living in your own house, right? So you will always say, listen, I'll go to my next house, I'll sell this house and go buy another house. So no matter what you do, that money is never going to come back to you. That money is gone. It's an expenditure. You are spending on a house. You are not investing in a house. That's your first house. And subsequent houses you might buy, those can be considered investments at some point in time because you could sell it without actually changing your lifestyle and actually take the cash and use it for something. But the first house you buy is always, or the house you live in is always going to be an expenditure. The other part of this equation is, should you buy it from a financial investment kind of game? Now, I feel that is a waste of time for multiple reasons. Perhaps we'll go into each of those. But suffice it to say, the reasons why people thought that having a house over your head is good is because in the earlier eras we've had, and even now perhaps in certain cases, you have situations where a landlord can just throw you out. To the point where once a landlord throws you out, you might go to have to find something else. You may have a small baby. You don't know where to find a house. You feel sick of this whole thing and it's gone. But it's not like that in more developed economies, where what happens is that there are professional companies that own apartment blocks and they rent them out. If you look at the home ownership statistics, that means if you look at any house and check if a person who's living in it is a person who owns it or a person who rents it. 70% of urban and more than 95%, so a blended 87% of homes in India are owned.
That's big number.
So that means if you look at the US, they call 63% too less and 66% good. So that's fantastic. Germany is what? I think 35-40%. New York is 35%. The more developed you are, the lower your home ownership statistic is. It's the same in India as well. In the urban towns, the larger urban towns, you have extremely high home ownership. And because you have extremely high home ownership, extremely low home ownership and extremely high renting. So because you have that, people are mobile. When I say mobile, it's like if you want to move to another part of town and you're renting, it's easy. Just pick up your stuff and go. And that is actually why, Germany or New York has such low home ownership rate. So having a high home ownership rate is not a good thing. In fact, it's probably a negative of development. And other thing is that our fascination with having a house we own has started to wane, because houses are now so much more expensive.
Yes, true.
And as a percentage of your salary, now if you look at what home ownership did in the US, is they have, if your annual income is $150,000, you might pay $175,000 for a house, maybe $200,000 in most of the US, other than the Bay Area and New York and all that, where you would actually have to pay 2x or 3x or 4x your income. In India, the average has been 5x. It's only come down to maybe 4x very recently. Our affordability is extremely low. And our interest rates are extremely high. So therefore, our EMIs are irrationally high compared to the West. And yet we are fascinated with home ownership. So it's not a great financial decision. And the amount you pay for making this emotional decision that cripples you for about 20 years of EMIs is actually an emotional toll you have to take to make that emotional decision of having to buy a house.
Even in China, bachelors have gone crazy. They have taken home loans and they have taken loans to even furnish the house. So I believe this is common across Asian cultures.
It is. In fact, in India also, you could I don't know if it's still possible, but you could take a home improvement loan and it classifies the same as a home loan. Now remember, home loans are actually cheaper than other kinds of loans. So a loan to buy a car is most likely to be more expensive to you as an individual than buying a house. There's a reason for this, because the government wants to promote home ownership. Why? Because it has its roots from the US. The US actually had done a bunch of surveys and they found out that people who own their own homes are likely to be more politically active, stable and participatory. And that is always good for a democracy, because you have a set of people who are politically stable. They will participate and they will perhaps vote for you. So somewhere around the 80s or the 90s, they started to promote home ownership by giving tax breaks around home ownership. India went to the other extreme. We have given like 17 different types of SOPs to home ownership, to the extent we get the lowest loan because they have the lowest risk weight among personal loans. People think the collateral is safe, therefore they're willing to give you big ticket loans 5 times your income, whereas anywhere else you'll get only maybe 1 time your income. There other other SOPs as well. You get an interest tax break, you get a tax break on principal, you get a if you sell a house, you can buy another house and you will not get taxed on the capital gains in India. That sounds absurd, because you can't sell one stock and buy another stock and say, listen, I just moved the money from one to the other.
Exactly. True.
So it's one of those investments where you can do these things. And then these are some of the areas, and there's others also. There's, home ownership subsidies at various times. They give you lower, cheaper loans for some kind of houses. So we pamper this sector tremendously, right? So at this point, if you were of the opinion that you didn't want to buy a house, when they start pampering you so much, you think that, okay, maybe I should. So it's cultural from a perspective of not just China and India. It's also been in the US. The US quickly discovered, of course, in 2000 from 2008 that promoting housing to this degree is a little crazy. But they still are in a situation where more than some 80%, I think, or 70% of loans given by banks are to mortgages. India is only 10%, thankfully. So I think India is doing the right thing. But the US still depends a lot on real estate and real estate movement. So although the prices may not increase, their affordability is much more in smaller towns. So home building is actually a GDP activity, and people tend to look at it as, listen, I'm building a house. So I'm building something I own. It's not necessarily that I care about whether its value goes up or down. And to that extent, people are for the most part happy. And India isn't like that. India, you pay for a house, you pay so much more than you rent versus in Germany or in the US. So for instance, if your EMI was $1,600 a month, if you rented the same house, you'd probably pay $1,600 or $1,500 a month. So it's so close, it's comparable. In India, if you rent for 15,000 rupees a month, this EMI for the same house for a 20-year period, if you put 20% down, would still be 45 or 50,000 rupees. So you're paying 3 or 4 times in EMI what you would pay in rent.
That actually brings me to the next type of buyer. So this type of buyer is the one who screams that I don't want to pay rent. They don't go to the extent of doing the detailed calculations. They simply say this: I am paying 28,000 for a 2 BHK apartment in Bangalore. Why not take a home loan and buy a 2 BHK for say 50-60 lakhs? Now this category is different because they are not even concerned about the fact that the rental yield in Bangalore is hardly 2.5%. And the home loan rate is around 8.5%. They simply say this: I don't want to pay exorbitant rents. It's interesting because they look at rent as some sort of a wasteful, rather consumption expenditure. Whereas EMIs are payments towards building assets. This is how they think. And even I know a couple of working professionals in Bangalore itself. Many people I interact with, they have actually built spacious homes in their hometown. Yet they have bought a house in Bangalore just because they didn't want to pay exorbitant rent. So it starts pinching them after 4-5 years. So what are your views on rent versus EMI debate?
In any other part of the world, I'd say if you can get rent close to EMI, then just go for the EMI. It's just easier. You don't want to get thrown out of the house if the landlord doesn't like you, and so on. In India, it's not so simple. Because while it not getting thrown out of a house is a good thing, most landlords now have figured out that, listen, there's just way too much supply. I better keep the person I have, because otherwise I'm not going to get somebody else on rent, and that's going to hurt me.
True.
The second part of this equation is it's completely financially crazy, in the sense you buy a 28,000 house rent. I mean, where you're living on rent for 28,000, you'll pay 1 to 1.1 crores in the house value. Let's say 1.1, and you even get a loan somehow for say 90 lakhs, and you put 20 lakhs down. So 90 lakhs loan will cost you around 80,000 rupees in EMI. Now you're paying 28,000. Now you're paying 80,000. How does it even compare? But the important point is this: that 80,000 rupee EMI consists of a 70,000 rupee interest component.
Yes.
And a 20,000 rupee principal component. So your 90 lakhs in the first month goes down only to 88 lakhs 80,000, which is 89 lakhs 80,000, because you only cut principal by 20,000 rupees. You are effectively paying 70,000 rupees of rent to the bank. It's just called interest. If you think it is wasteful to give your landlord 28,000 bucks, how is it not wasteful to give a bank 70,000 rupees for the same house, for the same place, and a house that you think you own, but actually the bank owns it until you've paid off most of the loan. But the point is that, assuming that you've gone to all this trouble to actually buy a house, your EMI is going to consist of way more rent paid to a bank than the rent you're paying to your landlord right now. So if you financially look at it, you're paying rent either way. So the argument that I don't want to pay rent is specious. It's incorrect because you are paying rent. Whether it's to a bank or to a landlord is irrelevant. You're paying money that's going down the drain for you. It's just the principal part that's building your house. And that principal part is 20,000 rupees. Now tell me this, if you have a 20 lakh balance and you can then invest that money and even get 10%, 8% out of it. Okay, let's say you just get 8%. If you get 8%, that's 1.6 lakhs. That's nearly 15K per month that investment will give you. So instead of putting in the principal of 20,000 rupees a month, you can take the principal that you have, which is 20 lakhs, put it into a deposit or something like that, or a fund, get 8%, and you'll get 15,000 or 14,000 rupees a month back from that investment. Whereas if you buy a house, you'll first pay 70,000 rent to the bank. You'll put 20,000 into buying your own house, which will take you 20 years to own. And in the end of it, you will just have a house, which you can't sell because you own it and you have to live in it. And if you sold it, you would only have to go and buy another house in order to live in that, because now you want to live in the house that you own. So technically you're doing nothing. Versus on the other side, if you just rent it and put the money into a bank, you'll have an investment that actually pays you back. And that is the real difference. But if people don't look at it emotionally, financially, they look at it emotionally. While I'm okay with that, I'm not convinced with any financial argument that is required to own a house.
Okay. So the third type of buyer is a typical real estate investor having a portfolio of properties. So people who accumulate houses to make a killing. So my point is, in the early 2000s, when the home loans were cheaper and property prices were moving at 20-25%, it made some sense to invest in an upcoming project. You could book 2 projects, sell one of them after a few years for a big gain, and use that money to repay the loan taken for the first property. Those days are now history. Property prices are now appreciating at a very slower pace. In some markets, prices have actually come down. And these kind of investors have suffered also, as property prices have stagnated and many builders have gone bankrupt and delayed completion of projects. So what would you advise such investors? Is it worth having a portfolio of real estate properties right now?
So I think the first thing that we mentioned was common in India as well, where you had people who bought 6 or 7 houses. Most of these were under construction. So what would happen is they would say, okay, you have to pay 10% upfront, and then the next 10% after, say, 3 months. So the deal was so good that if you bought 1,000 square foot apartment or 6 of them, and they were costing say 4,000 rupees per apartment, in 3 months the builder would increase the price to 4,500.
Exactly.
So what would happen there is your 1,000 square foot apartment at the 500 rupee price increase gives you 5 lakhs if you sell it.
True.
So if you put 10 lakhs per property and down, or sorry 4 lakhs per property down, because it's a 40 lakh property and you bought 4 lakhs.
You could make a killing.
You could literally roll every one apartment. After 3 months you sell the first one, pay the second installment, which is now subsidized by the amount that you made, the profit that you made from the first one. And then after 3 more months, the price has gone up to 5,000 rupees, another 500 rupees up. So that increase kept on paying for it. So this portfolio kind of approach worked, and you didn't have to put a lot of money. So instead of putting 40 lakhs into 6, which is 2.5 crores, for 2.4 crores, I will put only 40 lakhs because I need only 10%. And then I will slowly over time, end up with only 1 apartment. But in the middle, having sold those 5 apartments, I might have generated enough profit to have paid for maybe half of this house, which I actually own. So I've got a 40 lakh house, but I've actually put only about 20 lakhs of my own money. In many cases, the house is also free, in the sense the profit generated from the first 5 paid. But this thing has gone and you have no idea. In fact, what's happened in a lot of cases is people have tried this, and when the prices didn't increase and they weren't able to sell their apartments even at the original price, they stopped paying. So the builders got stuck, And some of these builders now have clauses that said if you own 5 or 6, you're going to have to pay a premium, and we're going to have to see some more cash flow from you, and so on. Because what's happened is if people don't pay for the intermediate installments, the builder is stuck. If the builder gets stuck, genuine buyers who want to actually live in that project rather than have to do this 5 investment thing, they also get stuck. So this portfolio approach works if you have a lot of money and you are able to sustain yourself over a period of time by owning and putting this money down straight away. Now this has worked in the US. I have friends in the US, in Florida for instance, who buy the entire condominium building. So the whole buildings are purchased by them and then they rent them out. They don't actually sell them, they rent them out. And the idea is to buy a entire building on an interest low interest loan. So you pay 3% on the interest of the loan. The rate that you can actually charge your customers adds up to an 8% charge. So you
awesome.
make the remaining 5% with some occupancy details and all that stuff. You might make about maybe so out of $100 you will pay $3 as interest. You will make $8 as rent. Now, people in India might not find that very exciting, because if a property earns you only 2.5% in rental yield, and you have to pay 9% for an interest of a loan, it's the opposite. If you buy a set of houses and rent them out, you're going to still continue to pay the bank on top of whatever rent you earn.
True.
So that's a complete waste of time in India. So the opposite situation happens. So it's financially unviable to buy portfolios for renting out. Given the situation today, it's unviable to buy properties to give, to hold and then sell them. But there are sometimes distress sales. And if you have a lot of money, this perhaps is one of those times, where you might say, okay, listen, if I have, maybe I can raise a couple of crores or maybe 5 or 6 crores. There are houses which are perhaps unfinished, where there may be a building with about 10 flats, just to give you an example, and the builder is bankrupt and he can't finish it. Okay. So you might go to him and say, listen, how much do people owe you for this property today? So if the guy says, listen, the last installment is left and each of them has to give me 25 lakh rupees. And you think about this and say, listen, if I were to get 25 lakh rupees from 10 people, that's 2.5 crores that the people will give me if I'm able to finish the project. Maybe I can pay the builder 1 crore or even lesser. Perhaps even pay him nothing. And say, I will take it off of your hands. I will put some of my money to finish this project. And that last installment of 2.5 lakhs will actually make me a profit when I build that out and turn it around and flip it to all of these people.
Okay.
So it may be that it's a 10 flat apartment where 2 flats are unsold. So the 8 flats that are sold, you could take the final installment from them, and you still have 2 flats left of an apartment that is now complete. And those 2 flats may add up and give you a profit, where you could perhaps share with the
But that's a lot of work, Deepak.
That's a lot of work. The other thing is to just go pure distress. So pure distress is somebody has got a loan, he wants to sell it, a bank is trying to repossess and sell. But that as an investor, you might say, listen, this is going to take 5 years. It's a good area, maybe there's a metro coming along, but that metro is going to take about 4 or 5 years for it to come, and you don't have a problem staying. And if you get a very good price, so a property that was, forget what it used to sell at, but let's say it sells at 50 lakhs today, and you get an offer for 40. You'll say, listen, in 5 years, my IRR needs to be, say, 18%. In 5 years, I need to see this property double. So go from 40 to 80 or 90. If you have the staying power and you believe that place will see that appreciation, you might want to take such bets. But this is a business. This is the same as saying I will hoard potatoes or tomatoes or onions. And, it doesn't always work, and you have to be willing to take that kind of a risk. People think there is some kind of, guaranteed profit. Real estate is a bunch of disappointments, one after the other. And if you're willing to go through all of that, be my guest. I mean, really, I don't own a house. I'm very happy to do that. I can tell everybody in the world, just own one house and live in it.
Sure, absolutely. A quick question. Is there a case for the prices to go up from here? Now, everyone is asking this question. So we all know that no asset class can keep going up forever. but how do you see the property prices panning out in the near future? So see, I meet a lot of people, and one set of people say that the property prices have bottomed out and will recover from here. And then there are others who say this is the beginning. There will be more default by real estate companies, and there will be more distressed properties. So the prices will stay soft for some more time in the future.
So I think, you will not find prices going up very substantially, because when they do, there'll be more availability that comes along and kind of cuts down the prices. Second
True.
thing is inflation is low. People are not getting huge salary increments as they used to. They can't afford to buy a 2 crore house now, because earlier what used to happen was, even if you bought an expensive house, your income would keep going up. So when the income keeps going up, your EMI becomes more and more affordable, because your EMI is fixed and your income is growing. So you start off with a 40,000 EMI, which is 40% of your salary. Your income grows to, instead of from 1 lakh a month, it becomes 3 lakhs a month. Now it's only 13% of your salary, far more affordable. Today, if you're getting 1 lakh a month, your increments are now substantially lesser. You might end up with, in a period of say 12 years, only grow to 2 lakhs a month. Just to give you an example. The 40,000 still is a 20% of your EMI, and your at this point the house has already become like 10 or 12 years old, and it's not going to be, even it's going to be something that you'll say, let me sell and go buy another house which will cost you 80,000 rupees. I mean, you think that the problem really is in all of this, the price increases have to be linked to inflation, have to be linked to the kind of houses and properties they are. An old property which does not have a lift today will sell for a lot lesser.
Yes.
So today you may have a house with a lift, but tomorrow there may be a house with an automated security input, output, something which comes next door to your apartment. So now your apartment is not going to sell for as much, because all this automated stuff is sitting in the other apartment. So the more facilities that are in the newer set of apartments, the older ones get depreciated in price accordingly, right? So the price increment that you might see on your apartment may be relative to these improvements that happen in other apartments going forward. Everything that is very expensive today to do, like say internal Wi-Fi or whatever, will become really cheap at some point in time. And once that happens, I mean, it's like a phase shift at some point. Today, you might say, I will not buy a house if it doesn't have a play area or a swimming pool. But there are lots of apartments without swimming pools. I mean, Bombay is full of them, and Bombay is, of course, the other side of, price, these things. But you have situation where, people now demand a lake view and this and that and all that stuff for a basic apartment. And at the same time, another apartment which you paid a lot of money, would have otherwise appreciated to 2x, is now trading at maybe 1.2 or 1.3x. Over the history of time that people have tracked property prices in India, we have seen that real estate has roughly given you the same kind of returns or less than stock markets. In fact, they've given you more like a fixed deposit. So maybe 10% or 11%. Because 10% was the kind of FD rates you used to have in the 80s and 90s. And that was all you would get. I mean, you would not get more than that. Whereas the stock market from that time was on 18%. So there's been a very big differential. So today now the stock market is giving you 7 or 8. Housing prices may give you 3 or 4. So I think housing prices will go up with inflation, but that's about a little bit more than inflation. That's about it.
Deepak, there is another question that people often ask is, should I buy a house for tax saving purposes?
This is, it's a very complicated thing. Do you want to pay tax to the government? Or do you want to pay interest to the bank? The answer is both ways money is going. I'll give you an example. Like, let's say you have a 20 lakh rupee loan left.
Okay.
And you're thinking, should I pay it back? I have 20 lakh somewhere. I have two choices for you. One is, let's say your loan was 10%. And you were able to, you instead of paying back, you're able to deploy the money somewhere else and also get 10%. So what would happen? You will get 2 lakh rupees as interest from wherever you earn. And you will pay 2 lakhs of interest to the bank. Net, you make nothing, right? Because whatever you made as income, that would also be taxed. Let's say an FD or something like that, it would also be taxed. And what you paid out as interest to this thing, that part is tax free. So net is nothing. So there's what you made is what you paid out, and they cancel each other out, and boom, that's done. So the only other way would be to say, listen, no, the bank is giving me interest at 8%, and I can make 10%. Now that would be awesome, but it's not always true that you make. What if you take some risk, because the risk-free rate is say 7%. You take some risk to make 10% and you don't make it. Stock market falls, something you buy falls, then you'll end up with a situation where you've actually lost money on your investment and also paid interest on the loan. So both things don't work. Now you say, okay, there's a tax saving. What happens if I kept the loan and I got 2 lakh rupees that I paid as interest, but I saved 20%, which is basically my tax rate was 20%. But let me ask you this. There is no reason why this changes. So let me say you wanted to go risk-free on both. You paid a 10% interest on your home loan, but the best interest you can get in a risk-free instrument is 8%.
Yes.
Right? So 20 lakh, 8% is 1,60,000. You earn 1,60,000. You pay 10% on the home loan, which is 2 lakh rupees. On the 2 lakh rupees that you pay out, your net effective tax rate is about 20%. So you might say, listen, I saved 40,000 rupees by paying the interest on this home loan. Remember, at 2 lakhs rupees, it's capped. Anything more than 2 lakhs rupees, you don't get a benefit anyhow. So anything more than this 20 lakhs or 25 lakhs, you should not even think. You should just pay off. But less than 25 lakhs, people ask questions and I say, okay, listen, there's no difference really, because if you paid it, if you didn't pay it, you would have to really struggle to earn this return back. You may be lucky and earn it, and then that differential you might make. The differential is very small. It's about 20, 30, 40,000 rupees for a person making with a house of say 1 crore. That much doesn't make a huge amount of difference to that person. But even if it did, it's not a significant amount of money. So, and there's significant risk, because no matter which way you look at it, at one end you're earning money, the other end you're paying out money. The net effective saving of doing all of this is only about 10 to 20% of the principal, the repayment that you're making, the interest payment that you're making, and that is almost useless. With the 2.5 lakh rupee interest saving that you're making, it would actually be better to say, listen, let me get rid of the loan. I will use new savings to build up my long-term corpus, and let me take it forward from there. Then what will happen is the EMI that you are going to pay, which is for a 20 lakh loan, you may be paying 22,000 rupees EMI. Take that EMI, put it and invest it somewhere. In a couple of years, I am sure that will earn you more than trying to do this interest and saving the money somewhere else stunt. It will just give you a much better peace of mind because you own the house outright, and over time it's actually a better structure. The only thing, the caveat that I would suggest is that if you can get one of those SBI max gain kind of loans where they say, I'll give you, it's a loan like an overdraft, where if you have excess cash, you can park it in that overdraft. They won't charge you interest, but you can keep on paying back principal. If you did that, it's effective to your having a fixed deposit, tax-free, that's giving you as much yield as the loan itself. So if your loan was 8.5%, you're actually earning 8.5 tax-free on that cash. So you pay back the loan, and then you use a certain amount of time to pay your EMIs and reduce the loan to zero.
Interesting.
There is no interest on that loan at all. You're only paying back principal every month. So this is actually a much better structure. It's not actually going to help you from a taxation perspective, but it's actually a better way to structure your loan so that you can pay back whenever you have excess cash.
Okay, thanks, Deepak. That's it, Deepak. That was my last question for you. Thanks a lot for taking our time and doing this. I hope our listeners like this topic.
Awesome. So this has been a very interesting session. Let us know. I'm Deepak Shenoy on Twitter, at Deepak Shenoy. There is Astute Aditya on Twitter. That's what Aditya is. We are at capital mind _ in on Twitter. Please do log in at capitalmind.in. Tell us your views. We've had a bunch of posts. We'll put the links in this post, in this podcast on our post around housing prices, how to calculate whether you should rent or whether you should buy. Our calculations actually show that you should actually rent unless you think prices are going to go up at 10% a year for the next 10 years. More on that in another separate podcast where we'll have some visualizations for you also available on the website. Consider please also looking at Capital Mind Premium. We have a Diwali offer for you guys. We have a 40% off for the next 15 days that will allow you to get Capital Mind Premium at a 40% discount from its original price. So that's about 10,000 plus GST. And this is a phenomenal offer. You'll get to interact with us on our chat, on our Slack platforms, read all our premium articles, and also look at our portfolio. So love to hear what you think. This is a real estate sign off. Thanks, Aditya. And this is over and out for me, Deepak.
Thanks a lot, Deepak.